Hello there and welcome back to Game Movie Recap. Today I'm going to recap The Equalizer 3 is a 2023 American vigilant action thriller film directed by Antoine Fuqua. Since giving up his life as a government assassin, Robert McCall finds solace in serving justice on behalf of the oppressed. Now living in southern Italy, he soon discovers his new friends are under the control of local crime bosses. As events turn deadly, McCall becomes their protector by taking on the mafia. But before we start, please support our channel by subscribing and click the bell icon for future notifications. Now, let's start. In the opening scene, Lorenzo Vitale, a prominent figure in the criminal underworld, is on his way to his private vineyard in Sicily, accompanied by his young grandson. Upon reaching the destination, Lorenzo instructs his grandson to stay inside the car while he carefully investigates the surroundings. To his shock, he discovers that many of his loyal associates have met a violent fate. As he delves deeper into the basement, he encounters Robert McCall, a former U.S. Marine and DIA agent, held at gunpoint by two of Lorenzo's henchmen. Lorenzo demands an explanation for Robert's unexpected presence, and Robert asserts that Lorenzo possesses something he shouldn't. This leads to a swift and intense confrontation, resulting in the demise of Lorenzo and the remaining enforcers. As Robert makes his way out of the vineyard, he notices Lorenzo's grandson in the car, advising the child to stay put. However, as Robert approaches his own vehicle, the young boy unexpectedly opens fire, injuring Robert, and then hastily departs from the scene. Despite his wounds, Robert remains resolute and manages to catch a ferry back to mainland Italy. Later that evening, as Robert continues his journey along the picturesque Amalfi Coast, the pain and blood loss become unbearable, ultimately forcing him to come to a halt, and he loses consciousness. Fortunately, a local policeman by the name of Gio Benucci stumbles upon him and decides to offer his help. Gio transports him to the tranquil town of Altamont, where a compassionate physician, Dr. Enzo, attends to his injuries. When Robert regains consciousness, Dr. Enzo updates him about Gio's act of kindness, prompting Robert to reflect on his own moral code. Although he intends to plan his departure, Dr. Enzo insists that he make a full recovery first and provides him with a place to stay. Under Dr. Enzo's care, Robert gradually regains his strength and within 3 days is able to move about, albeit with the assistance of a walking stick. During his stroll around Altamont, Robert discreetly avoids local law enforcement. He eventually finds himself in a cafe operated by a woman named Amina, who serves him coffee despite his request for tea. Shortly after, Gio, accompanied by his daughter Gabby, enters the cafe. While Amina keeps Gabby company, Gio discreetly returns Robert's car keys and mentions that he hasn't inspected his belongings. He assures Robert that he's safely parked Robert's car nearby for when he's ready. In the following sequence of events, Robert covertly reaches out to the CIA Financial Operations Group, contacting an agent named Emma Collins to inform her about the unlawful activities camouflaged as routine business taking place at the Sicilian vineyard. Having shared this crucial intelligence, Robert deactivates his phone, while Emma swiftly disseminates the information among her CIA colleagues. Over the course of several days, Robert continues to explore the streets of Altamont, gradually forming bonds with the town's residents. During his explorations, he becomes aware of the Camorra, an Italian crime syndicate that routinely extorts the local townspeople, demanding a share of their earnings. One afternoon, Robert witnesses a local fishmonger named Angelo being brutally assaulted by Marco Quaranta, a prominent figure within the Camorra. Before leaving, Marco ominously warns Angelo of his imminent return the following week for a collection. After the altercation, the mobsters proceed to a substantial building where Vincent Quaranta, the head of the Camorra and Marco's sibling, is actively involved in evicting the town's inhabitants. It becomes clear that the gang's broader agenda is to transform the town by constructing opulent hotels, leisure resorts, and gambling establishments. Inside one of the apartments, an elderly man confined to a wheelchair boldly defies the ruthless mob. In retaliation, they hang him perilously from a window, intending to end his life. Meanwhile, Robert and Enzo share a leisurely supper together, and Robert expresses his gratitude by offering to help Enzo with his daily tasks. The following morning, he ventures to the market, making a point to visit Angelo's stall. Angelo, displaying immense hospitality, refuses any payment for the goods, stating that it's an honor to serve a friend of Enzo's. In a different location, inspired by Robert's revelations, Emma and her CIA team descend on the Sicilian vineyard. Their investigation reveals a substantial amount of money and vast quantities of illegal drugs hidden within a storage space. Shocked by the magnitude of these operations that had previously escaped their notice, Emma and her colleague, Frank Conroy, resolved to delve deeper into the matter. On a later rainy day, as Enzo tends to Robert's injury, Robert inquires about why he didn't summon medical professionals or law enforcement when he discovered him. Enzo recalls Robert's earlier contemplation regarding his moral compass, suggesting that Robert's uncertainty reflected his inherent goodness. As dusk falls the following day, Robert, with his belongings packed, prepares for his departure. However, his attention is captivated by the tolling of a bell, and he observes the townspeople congregating around Angelo's establishment. Upon arriving at Angelo's establishment, it becomes painfully clear that Marco's crew has set his business on fire due to his inability to meet their extortionate demands. Despite the townspeople's resentment of the Camorra's brutality, they feel utterly powerless against them. In the aftermath of the fire, Robert joins forces with several locals to help Angelo clear away the debris. During this time, Gio reviews footage of the arson attack and reaches out to the National Police Force, inquiring about a suspicious van captured outside Angelo's store. Simultaneously, Robert continues his recuperation, becoming deeply immersed in the local community and strengthening his connection with Emina. His exploration of Altamonte's culinary delights further solidifies his attachment to the town. As a result, the Camorra's growing incursion and influence in Altamonte begin to deeply trouble him. On a typical morning, while enjoying coffee at Emina's cafe, Robert notices Emma covertly attempting to photograph him. Playfully, he suggests a more flattering angle for the shot. Emma presses him about how he possesses such intricate details about the concealed operations at the vineyard. Preferring to maintain some ambiguity, he provides evasive responses, encouraging her to focus on her ongoing investigation. As she departs, she addresses him by his given name, catching him off guard. Later in the afternoon, as Gio prepares to pick up his daughter Gabby from school, an anonymous call informs him of her early release. A worried Gio consults one of Gabby's school teachers, who reveals that a policeman had taken Gabby some time ago. Distraught, Gio rushes home, where he is confronted by a horrifying sight. His family is being held hostage by the ruthless Camorra syndicate. Marco, seeking vengeance for Gio's interference, physically assaults him and warns him not to meddle further, or else his family will face dire consequences. That evening, Robert notices a battered Gio emerging from Enzo's clinic. Curious, he seeks an explanation for the incident. Enzo explains that such brutal acts at the hands of the Camorra are sadly commonplace in many towns. He likens the Camorra's presence to a terminal illness that seems almost impossible to cure. The following day at a local church, Robert and Emma cross paths once more. Emma reveals that Lorenzo Vital had been a top priority for Interpol for years due to the scale of his criminal empire. She's puzzled by Robert's decision to tip her off anonymously and seeks to understand his motivations. Evading the question, Robert advises her to investigate why Sicily became a hotspot for these illicit activities. Emma promises to uncover the truth soon in hopes that in their next meeting, her primary question will be answered. That night, as Gio and his family enjoy a peaceful dinner at a local eatery, their tranquility is shattered by the arrival of Marco and his henchmen. They insist on Gio's assistance in obtaining a vessel for their secretive operations and disrupt the family's meal. Robert, who happens to be at the same venue, intervenes, fervently pleading with them to spare the innocent family. In response to Robert's interference, Marco sternly warns him not to meddle in affairs that don't concern him. Remaining calm and composed, Robert expresses his deep attachment to the town and its residents. He persuasively implores Marco to relocate his operations, cautioning him about the consequences of defiance. Ignoring the warning, Marco swiftly finds himself immobilized by Robert, in considerable pain. Robert then forces Marco to leave his firearm on the dining table and exit with his gang. Shortly after this tense confrontation, a furious Marco, thirsting for revenge, hatches a plan to return to the eatery with his goons and eliminate Robert. However, before they can execute their scheme, Robert commandeers a van and rams it into two of Marco's associates, initiating a fierce brawl. In a climactic moment, Marco manages to corner Robert with a blade, threatening to end his life. Exhibiting remarkable agility, Robert disables Marco by driving the knife into Marco's throat, leading to his death. The following day, Frank communicates information to Emma from Rome regarding an explosion at a recent railway station. Together, they infer that the funds discovered at the vineyard are connected to a parallel act of terrorism. Emma concludes that the Camorra is financially supporting acts of terrorism using profits from drug trafficking into Sicily. Additionally, she speculates that Naples serves as the primary conduit for these drug shipments and suspects the involvement of another group in Naples. With the goal of exposing the entire operation, Emma initiates interrogations of influential Camorra figures and also seeks collaboration with the chief of Naples' police force. Subsequently, the same police chief is seen attending Marco's memorial service at Vincent's lavish residence. During this event, he informs Vincent about the investigation conducted by CIA agent Emma into their illicit activities. Mourning his brother's death and enraged by this revelation, Vincent forcibly severs the police chief's hand, insisting on his top priority being the identification of Marco's killer. Following this gruesome act, Vincent sends the injured chief to a medical facility, with his severed appendage preserved in a chilled container. Meanwhile, Emma receives word about the dire situation of the police chief. Shortly afterward, she receives a call from Robert, who informs her about the Camorra's association with the drug syndicate, which is linked to the previous station bombing. This vital information from Robert inadvertently saves Emma from a concealed explosive device planted in her vehicle by Vincent. In the ensuing explosion, Emma is injured and rushed to a hospital. There she meets with Frank and briefs him on the Camorra's activities. Recognizing the seriousness of the situation, Frank commits to overseeing the rest of the operation. During the late evening hours, Vincent seizes Gio and his family, putting them in a dangerous predicament. He delivers a chilling ultimatum. He will publicly execute the family unless the person responsible for his brother's death is identified. Vincent's impatience mounts, and he fires a shot that grazes Gio's ear. At this moment, Robert steps forward, revealing his identity and urging Vincent to release the hostages. He declares his willingness to be captured and punished, though away from the public eye. Vincent, filled with arrogance reminiscent of his late brother, rejects Robert's plea, determined to make a public spectacle of his revenge. However, the situation takes a turn as the townspeople start recording the event, forcing the criminals to make a hasty retreat. Later that night, Robert stealthily infiltrates Vincent's residence, systematically incapacitating his security team. Vincent, awakened by a drop of blood, narrowly avoids imminent danger as a glass above him shatters. Desperately, he reaches for his firearm, attempting to call for his now disabled associates. In a tense confrontation, Robert corners Vincent, compelling him to ingest a lethal mixture of his own narcotics. In a futile attempt to escape, Vincent staggers through the alleys of Naples before succumbing to the overdose. At dawn, Robert visits Emma at the hospital, receiving her gratitude for saving her life. He places a bag of money at her feet and shares the story of Greg Dyer, a victim of cyber theft. Emma realizes that Robert had traced the stolen funds to the vineyard, eliminated Lorenzo and his crew, and recovered Greg's stolen assets. Curious, she asks about Robert's connection with Greg, only to discover that they had a singular encounter. Subsequently, Emma travels to Boston and presents the recovered funds to Greg and his spouse. Overwhelmed, Greg questions the identity and motives of their mysterious benefactor. While Emma shares Greg's curiosity, she assures him of her genuine intentions. Relieved, Greg enthusiastically suggests they abandon their plans to sell their home. At the CIA's primary base in Langley, Virginia, Frank presents Emma with a package. Inside, she finds her mother's diary along with a note from Robert. As she connects the dots, a revelation dawns on her. Robert had once been an associate of her parents within the CIA's ranks. In the concluding scene, the residents of Altamont celebrate a soccer victory. Amidst the festivities, Robert is embraced as one of their own, joining in the celebration. The end. What do you think of the movie? Drop your thoughts in the comments section below. Don't forget to hit like and support the channel by subscribing, and click the bell icon so that you won't miss our future recaps. And if you have any movie you want us to recap, please do tell us in the comments section as well. And until next time.